The Taliban certainly turn a blind eye to opium production and the processing of heroin, but we saw no evidence that the Taliban as a movement was involved in the drugs trade. In fact, they allow the UN drugs people a free hand in the areas they control.
What Taliban say in the meetings that I've had with them is that they try to take action against traffickers. They do arrest people trafficking in opiates, but that dealing with the farmers is much more difficult. There are more of them. The farmers are supporters to some extent of Taliban, or to a large extent of Taliban. If the Taliban were to go into areas and forcibly eradicate opium poppy without bringing alternatives, the farmers would fight them.
Yet the basic fact is that 2/3 of all the opium and heroin which Afghanistan produces originate in Taliban territory. This is the customs post at Herat, which the Taliban control. It's the main check on goods heading for Iran and Central Asia. The opium tends to go to Iran, where it's causing a big problem. As for the heroin, it goes by lorry to the border with Turkmenistan, in what used to be Soviet Central Asia. There are no real controls. From there, it passes on to Russia and on to Western Europe. The Taliban have got rid of the bandits and warlords who used to operate along the road. That's good, of course, though it also makes the business of transporting drugs that much easier. The Taliban are prepared to consider stopping the trade, though, as the Pakistani minister with the closest links to the Taliban told us.
They are more than willing to give that up, provided the West comes up and makes an investment in the rehabilitation work. And I am quite prepared to go on record that that would be possible and it could be done, provided the West had an open mind and came up. We can have the poppy cultivation totally suspended and stopped.
Back on the Pakistani side of the border, in the area around Dir, the West has certainly invested in rehabilitation work, and it's reduced poppy cultivation there. This was once one of the main opium-producing areas of Pakistan. Now Britain and the United States have both put money into a crop substitution scheme to encourage the farmers to grow wheat instead.
The poppy problem cropped up in the mid-70s, and I think it served to focus everybody's minds on the fact that if a poor part of the world is left to decay on its own, then it's bound to create problems for the rest of the world. The people need and deserve a leg up in their own efforts.
It's not possible that we'll grow poppies again. People have got used to working on new crops. They believe they'll make more money growing onions and wheat.
The position isn't as rosy as this everywhere in Pakistan, but the anti-drugs campaign has been remarkably successful here, even so. The trouble is, there's not much point in getting rid of heroin in Pakistan if huge supplies are available, unchecked, just across the border in Afghanistan. Not far from the hills is one of the most depressing sights anywhere. Little groups of addicts huddled together from the cold and rain, smoking the heroin they can buy for a few pence. They're utter outcasts. Some are Pakistanis, most are Afghan refugees from the camps here in Pakistan. Often their stories are pathetic. This man started taking heroin because he became depressed when his wife died. He could well be dead himself by next winter. The addicts are just buried in the ditches where they've lived and died. The heroin which kills them comes from Afghanistan. There was a huge increase in heroin production there during the jihad, the war against the Russians. Afghan Mujahideen groups funded their entire war effort by growing opium poppies, and Western governments knew all about it. The Taliban supporters in Pakistan nowadays think the Taliban aren't the only ones to blame.
This is what the West taught them to finance the jihad. It was an indicator to them that they could do, and they turned a blind eye.
The Americans didn't make any fuss about it?
No. I suppose I thought that probably at the end of the day they'd be able to control it effectively.
But they haven't been able to?
No, they haven't.
The producers of opium and heroin in Afghanistan have done extremely well out of the West's lack of interest. During the war with the Russians, we pretended the drugs weren't a problem. Now we know they are, but we don't do anything serious to stop it. The West doesn't want to get involved in Afghanistan. It's a black hole. And yet the drugs it produces have become a serious threat to the whole of Western society.
That report